Hello, coaches. Welcome to this month's November Buddha Belly Life Coaches Education. I'm Coach Britt, and if you are new to this whole thing, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown. I know for my veteran members, you guys are maybe sick of hearing this, so you could probably fast forward this part of the video. But each month, we are hell-bent on growing. So we're going to grow as coaches. We're going to grow in our business and our entrepreneurship skills, and we're going to grow in our skills as coaches. And that also means growing in our knowledge. And because most coaches and most of you guys that are in the functional wellness arena usually have a thirst for ongoing knowledge. That's why you'll take course after course and do all these different things, right? So we are application based at HWCA, and Buddha Belly Life likes to support our coaches in their ongoing growth, both in business and in knowledge, all in one place. So that's what we do here. So you're going to see that once a month as a member, you get access to a monthly business mastermind. You get access to done for you content. You get access to recipes and resources for your coach or for your clients. And you're also going to get access to more stuff with microbiome labs or any kind of biome testing and gut specific supplement regimens and education. And the most, I think probably one of the most enjoyable pieces, I mean, I love the masterminds, but I know that the coaches really love these classes. So each month we cover a different topic. This keeps our education growing. This keeps us more dynamic as coaches. So I'm Coach Britt, founding educator for the Holistic Wellness Coaching Academy and author of Buddha Belly. So we're going to get started in this month's class. This month we're going to be covering food allergens, intolerance, and removal protocols, really kind of understanding what these are, the differences in them, the relationship, the growth relationship, how they are kind of connected. They're not completely separate. And what we can do as coaches, and really understanding what are some things that played factors in how maybe we got here, right? So we're going to talk about all that because it's really important to know, because if we're going to be making headway as coaches, if we're going to be helping people advance what they're doing and get somewhere with their health, then we need to be keen on what is going on in their bodies. And food intolerances are at an all-time high. They're up there with autoimmune conditions and all kinds of things that we're seeing. So, and mental health, right? Huge increases in this stuff. So you guys, the outline for this month's class for all my member coaches, we're going to talk a bit about what are food allergies versus intolerance. We're going to talk about common allergens and common intolerances. Now these lists differ, and you're going to see why when we get into this class. Prevalence of allergies and the rise of reactivity, kind of what we're talking about, like what the heck is going on. Removal protocols, what are they, why we do them, how to do them, and then coaching, not diagnosing. So again, how we can help people with this information that they're not accessing anywhere else without stepping out of our scope of practice. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Okay, so if you guys are ready, let's do this. Okay, so food allergies versus intolerance. Now, forgive me a little bit. I took my glasses off because the glare is just so bad on these lights, but my glasses really, I am using them more and more. I find I use them more in winter. I don't know if your guys' eyes do that, but mine do that a lot. So it's like when the weather gets kind of dreary, cloudy, my eyes change. So it's weird, but anyway, so I'm going to do my best, a little more blind than normal, to follow my notes here and teach you guys without losing you. Okay, so food allergy versus intolerance. So a true food allergy, you guys, is going to affect the immune system. So it's going to be an immune response. If you have a food allergy, if you've ever seen someone with a food allergy or any kind of allergy, bees and whatnot, you understand that it's severe. Even a small amount of the offending substance can trigger a range of symptoms, so they can be severe, even life-threatening. My husband has an extreme an allergy to dairy, to milk. So all milk protein. So if he has any of it, different things will affect him faster and more severely than others. If there's a little butter in some of his food, it tends to not affect him as harshly as if he has even a sip of milk. He usually gets stuck when we get coffee, because all it takes is taking a drink of that without me pre-checking it. We order him a non-dairy option, but if I don't pre-check it first and he takes even just one drink, he will start going into full anaphylactic shock, which is where his or anaphylaxis, which is where his esophagus tightens up. He feels it in his back, his palms get funky. I mean, it is bad. So in contrast, a food intolerance is going to more affect the digestive system. It's going to be lighter symptoms. It's more like the gut's intolerance to a food, right? And we're going to talk in a little bit about how they're not totally different, or they're not totally disconnected, okay? And this is kind of different than the way that these things are viewed by a lot of medical professionals and stuff. So symptoms of are going to be food allergies, going to be tingling, itching in the mouth, especially a raised rash or hives, some swelling of the face or mouth or throat. This is difficulty swallowing. Like I said, my husband starts getting pain in the middle of his back, which is likely his esophagus, but he feels it kind of in his back. Wheezing, shortness of breath, feeling dizzy, lightheaded, sick, vomiting even, abdominal pain, and then digestive distress can accompany allergies too, so diarrhea, things like that. Hay fever-like symptoms such as sneezing, itchy eyes. He's always itching his eyes if he gets any milk. Swollen tongue, breathing difficulties, tight chest, trouble swallowing or speaking, feeling dizzy or faint, collapse. Now, there's a few different levels of how medically different types of like food allergies and stuff like that they'll diagnose it. And some of these were really weird to me, or one of them, and you'll see in a second. So a non-IgE mediated food allergy. This is another type of allergic reaction. It is a non-IgE mediated food allergy. So the symptoms of this type of allergy can take much longer to develop, sometimes up to several days. Some symptoms of non-IgE medicated food allergy may be what you would expect to see in an allergic reaction, such as the redness and itchiness of the skin, itchy rash, hives, the skin. You're going to see it a lot with the skin, right? And for those of us who studied the gut, obviously, we know that the gut and the skin are very interconnected. The skin is the largest organ on your body, and the gut loves to communicate with us through the skin, through things like acne, etc. So it's not, surprising that when there's an allergic reaction of some sort, that maybe the gut is going to communicate through the skin in the forms of rashes and things. We see this a lot with infants, with babies and children. I can't tell you how many countless moms especially ask questions about these random things appearing on their baby's skin and body. And like I said, we're careful. It's not our job to diagnose or anything, but some of the most common things that are removed from either mom's diet or baby's diet tend to be dairy and gluten. And we will often see a huge clear up of was a terrible case of eczema or a rash on a baby. And we can see this in adults and stuff a lot too, but that's usually a really easy place that we tend to start because we see this so much. So the vomiting, again, abdominal cramps, constipation. So in babies, we'll show this stuff. They're often, you guys are going to be called colic babies. And this is what is so hard and so frustrating with terms like colic. It's a lot like, I refer to this when we talk about IBS in adults. I say, it's really just a generic terminology to reference a set of common symptoms that show up regularly in a person. Colic is the same thing. We're saying, hey, there's tummy issues, which is leading to an inconsolable crying baby. Maybe they're really gassy, they're really, postured and tense and things like that. These are common symptoms, and we say they must be colicky. That is not any information. That is just a name we're giving to a common occurrence that we see. That's not any kind of root understanding of what is going on with the child. And just like kind of IBS and stuff like that is too. We're seeing more and more that IBS in adults is linked to things like SIBO and stuff. So we're having this dysbiosis, this overgrowth in the upper small intestine that is leading then to a lot of these elimination infrequencies and symptoms that are indicative of IBS, right? So the root of it, to understand it deeper, is really, really beneficial. Some people will have things like they call mixed reaction. So children can have this too. Where they experience both IgE symptoms such as swelling and non-IgE symptoms such as like the constipation, digestion piece. This especially can happen in children who have a milk allergy. One thing that we've seen a lot in people too is that, when a baby, so kind of understanding a little bit about allergies, at least some theories about it, okay? You guys, I'm not putting a stamp on this. I really encourage you to go research it yourself. But one thing that we know is infants and children are born with a very naturally and intentionally permeable gut lining. So what this means is that there's a lot of opening. It allows a ton of free flow into their bloodstream, right? So as we grow up, if we have a healthy gut, then those junctions, they close, they hold tight, right? Because when they don't, we call that leaky gut. When it's dysfunctioning, it's leaky gut. A baby has a more intentionally purposeful leaky gut. This is because they have one food source by nature. By nature, they're just supposed to have breast milk. And that breast milk is high nutrition. And it's very clean. So for that breast milk to be able, the baby easily absorbs nutrition, and it doesn't have a problem passing through the body. Even the bloodstream. It doesn't need to protect from anything essentially, except for outside germs, viruses, invaders, and things like that. Breast milk will give the baby the highest immune system response, the best immune system response to germs and viruses, etc. This is just the way nature designed it. But we have more and more babies that now are born via C-section, so they have a different composition of gut bacteria that maybe does not favor proper functionality of the gut. If they're not breastfed on top of that, and they're being introduced to cow's milk protein in the form of a formula or soy or any of these alternatives to human milk, we can see an induced allergen in response to early exposure of these substances. Because now, let's say the baby that was meant to be on mom's milk is having cow's milk, which is different, okay? And I know that there's times we just couldn't avoid these things, but it helps us to understand it so that we can help reverse or identify or prevent or restore the things that happen, whether we could control it or not. My first son I had issues with my breast milk. He had terrible colic, terrible gut issues. And by 6 months, I had to also supplement with organic formula while still doing my best to nurse him, because he was wasting away. He was not holding down weight, and he was vomiting everything I had. I could not make more. And so it was either my child loses weight to an unhealthy degree, which is what he started to do, or I find a way to feed him. So all the sympathy, you guys remember, this is never about shame or judgment. It's about education and understanding. So with the baby, what happens is, even maybe my son or other children, they're introduced to something that they weren't intentionally supposed to see in the beginning. So their gut was not supposed to see cow's milk, maybe ever, but especially not in the first 2 years of life. The first 2 years, that's why they say breastfeeding, if you can go for 2 years, is really an ideal time, because it takes about 2 years for that baby's gut to kind of seal up, to get more better functioning on its own, so that it can protect the bloodstream from the particles. And so it doesn't need to worry about protecting from breast milk as much, And so if you can breastfeed for 2 years, that's ideal. Well, a lot of babies, that's not the case for them. And so they're seeing substances like cow's milk, dairy, soy, and things like this, and it is leaching into the bloodstream. They have a permeable gut already. And so this is where we see too, what does the body do? In the case of leaky gut, this is where we're seeing a ton. What does the body do? It mounts an immune response. We get inflammation. Maybe our body starts developing a complete immune reaction to something. And so these are some things that can help set us up for allergies and intolerances, and not just to the substances that are the original offenders, but to all kinds of stuff, because it just can really confuse the immune system in the body. So I encourage you to do some research on that. Totally look it up. This is stuff that, obviously we talk about more in holistic health and functional wellness. But you gotta dig more to find it, because it kind of goes against the grain in the atypical educational environment. So so mixed reaction. So we talked about that. But this one was weird to me. Exercise-induced allergy. Now, don't get too excited now for those people who don't really love the gym to start saying you have an allergy to working out. But in some cases, a food allergy can be triggered by eating a certain food and then exercising. This can lead to anaphylaxis in severe cases, sometimes known as food-dependent exercise-induced anaphylaxis. So this was super weird to me. I had never heard of something like that. Drinking alcohol or taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory and NSAID, such as aspirin or ibuprofen, may also trigger an allergy in people with this syndrome. So this is people that have a certain processing system that causes this to happen, and I found that really strange. because that would be very confusing too, unless you've been able to diagnose it. You'd probably think it was kind of in your head. Why would you just be reacting after a certain situation and not always when you ate that food? Like, that is very different. Some common allergens, you guys. So these are allergens. So these are the more common things that people have, like real known food allergies to. Milk, eggs, fish, crustacean, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, and soybeans. Okay, these are gonna be common allergens. On the reverse, and this is what's interesting for my gut health coaches, because those of you who go through and train in removal protocol, this is gonna sound a lot more common of what we use in removal protocol for gut issues, and these are more of the intolerance foods. So lactose intolerance, dairy, gluten, FODMAPs. So these are specific proteins found in a lot of foods, and I think it's funny that they say, or it's found in a lot of healthy foods. Actually, FODMAPs are fibers that actually are beneficial for us and feed the good gut bacteria, as you guys probably know. And so an intolerance to FODMAPs is generally what we see in IBS people with IBS or diagnosed IBS symptoms, okay? And so what that means is that they are not digesting those fibers well because of the state of likely dysbiosis and overgrowth within their gut. And so while these foods are really healthy for good gut bacteria, they're essential really for a thriving, positive bacterial community, we can have issues digesting them if someone has this, maybe SIBO or some kind of IBS type symptoms. We see that one a lot, and so one of our biggest tricks is how to get the gut in alignment enough that it can tolerate FODMAPs, not to eliminate them completely. How this is usually handled is a lot of people will be told to just avoid FODMAPs. And while yes, temporarily that may be a necessary thing to do because you don't want to, go through hell on the toilet 100 times a day or reacting horribly to all these foods, the goal should be a temporary removal of some of those foods while we restore the gut and have proper ways of introducing these foods back in so that the gut bacteria can get their preferred food source, or else we're going to have issue. Soy, corn, coffee, yeast, and wine. Okay, so I'm going to reread that. Lactose, so dairy, gluten, FODMAPs, soy, corn, coffee, yeast, and wine. Okay, these are common intolerance foods. So we're going to see if someone has an intolerance, they're going to have gut issues with these foods. They're going to have maybe acid reflux, a silent reflux. They're going to maybe have, reactivity with their skin. They're going to maybe get flushed or puffy. Maybe they have a histamine issue. They may see, bloating is going to be very, very common. Maybe water retention, digestive symptoms and irregularities and things like that. Those are going to be common intolerances. And the thing is that intolerances, kind of like those long IgE allergies, can take a few days to really come into fruition. So that's why when we are finishing a removal protocol, we say allow at least 3 days in between reintroducing a food, because you may not know what foods you're reacting to unless you give it that time in between. Because you may, let's say I discovered when I did my first gut protocol that my body did not love peanuts and corn even too, but peanuts. And so, but it would kind of wait a minute. Corn actually was the one that would wait a little while for me. And so I would have thought, I wouldn't have necessarily known it was corn that was making me react that way if I had just tried to go off, the first few hours after eating it. I didn't really feel it. It was later that I would feel it. And so that's why it's kind of important to understand some of these things. But that's where the intolerance list is going to be more when we do removal protocols. It's more indicative of the intolerance foods and less of the allergen foods, because people kind of figure out if they have allergies or issues with things like eggs. They'll probably know if they have a fish or shellfish or peanut allergy. They probably have already had to discover that early on. I don't see that really come out later in life very frequently. But it can too, but it's not as often. So the prevalence of food allergies and intolerance, you guys, I'm going to read you something. So in Canada, so I know we've got students all over the world, we've got member coaches all over the world, but in Canada, they're an industrialized nation just like the States here. Hospital admissions due to food allergies have increased 500% since just 1990. So Canada tracked the increased incidence of food intolerance and found that there has been a 500% rise in the hospitalization due to food allergies since 1990. This prevalence of food intolerance and allergy is rising substantially in the parts of the world where processed food consumption is most prevalent. Are we surprised about this? And this isn't necessarily intolerance, you guys. This is like hospitalized allergies that they have tracked in Canada. Factors as to why this might be happening, okay? And I'm going to elaborate on this in a minute. Include pollution, dietary changes, less exposure to microbes, which change how our immune systems respond. This is their rendition, and I'm going to elaborate on this. Migrants appear to show a higher prevalence of asthma and food allergy in their adopted country compared to their country of origin, further illustrating the importance of environmental factors. So, gut coaches, what do we say about this, huh? What do we say? We say that the gut has such high power over our health, in all aspects, and especially over food allergies and intolerances, right? Like we talked about the junctions of the gut and leaking stuff into the bloodstream, right? Well, you know, some issues could be pollution. What does pollution do? It destroys the gut ecosystem. Dietary changes, okay, two components to that. One, processed crappy food that is going to it is going to feed the overgrowth of opportunistic bacteria that usually works against our health, and it's going to starve the bacteria that we need to be more in greater numbers, that it benefits our health, right? It's going to starve it and it's going to feed this, and it is going to cause damage, you know, those processed foods, the chemicals, the junk. It's going to create a permeable gut lining leading to leaky gut. So of course, yes, now if we've got a leaky gut, if we have gut dysbiosis, we're going to see issues with processing foods, and we will see a higher incidence of food allergies and intolerance, especially all day long. The other part of that too is, like they said, our native origins. Your gut cultivates itself in your environment. So we see this with even our ethnic backgrounds and places of origin. One of the things that we saw when, you know, the Native Americans were robbed of their land and moved to areas of just desolate nature and stuff like that, or when, you know, they took slaves, right? And they brought slaves over from different continents. Not only likely were health consequences due to the trauma of the situation and everything happening and the lack of, you know, nourishment and food and things like that, but also the change of natural environment. So how do we live now, right? We're always changing. That's why they talk about like eating locally grown food and things that grow in your environment. Your body has evolved even state by state for some of us, you know, even within one country, it evolves by state depending on climate. And your gut and your body will acclimate to the microbes in the areas that you reside. And if we change that really quickly, so if one of us goes and moves to another country, there's a high likelihood that the gut has to reprogram itself. Now, I think it's pretty resilient in doing that, but we see this a lot with students and stuff that go study abroad for a prolonged period of time. All of a sudden their incidences of mental health have increased a lot in doing that. And we can only hypothesize that yes, the change of environment, being away from family, but also potentially we're seeing a correlation to gut issues with that. So with these mental health increases, our challenges over in these scenarios, we're also seeing a greater number of gut issues accompany those things. And we know that the gut-brain connection is so powerful. So if the gut is not doing well, then the brain is going to struggle more too, those serotonin, dopamine, etc. And so this goes back, just keeps going to show that our gut and the microbes that live within our gut, and then being part of the environment that we were meant to to thrive in, right? This is lack of exposure. We're not getting outside. Our crops are grown. We've destroyed a lot of the soil that the crops are grown in. So those healthy microbes that we were getting in the soil, we're not getting as much anymore. Our bodies are taking on large loads of chemicals, hence class last month, right? Which if you didn't catch it, catch the audio recording version. But I mean, this is crazy. And so obviously the degrading of our gut ecosystem is very, very much at the center of the increase for food intolerance and allergy. And what that helps us to know is it helps us to know how we can move forward and what we can do about that. So for instance, like celiac is a full-blown autoimmune response to a protein found in wheat. Okay, this response causes inflammation and eventually deterioration of the gut barrier function, leaky gut, right? Leading to a whole host of symptoms such as abdominal pain, joint pain, long-lasting inflammation throughout the body. We can see symptoms of inflammation from gluten in people who are highly sensitive to it, especially celiac, for upwards of 6 months from consuming some of it. And obviously we've looked into why maybe that we've, thrown around the ideas as to why this is, but we do know that the wheat that we are in contact with now is not the same as a lot of the stuff that we had years and years ago. And not only is it grown differently, not only is it produced differently, is it sprayed with stuff, is it, but also too, we're eating it in such a large amounts. I mean, think about it. If the average American diet consists of 70% processed foods, how much wheat, corn, and soy are they consuming? It is a ton of grain, a ton of GMO grains, a ton of pesticides, a ton of chemicals, and what is that doing to our gut ecosystem? So no wonder we're seeing this huge rise in gluten issues. Anemia and malabsorption are actually common symptoms of a gluten intolerance and celiac disease. Due to the fact that the gluten protein is known to deteriorate the gut barrier in individuals with celiac and even intolerance, it's not surprising that we also see the co-symptoms of anemia, malabsorption along with it. If someone degrades the gut, it affects the body's ability to absorb nutrients from food and process them efficiently. So with a poor gut, this is why we don't just test for, test blood and just make recommendations based on that, or you're low in this vitamin or this thing or this thing. Because if you understand the gut, then you understand that a lot of the times the state of the gut ecosystem is leading to, or likely leading to, a lack of processing nutrients in the body and deficiencies. And only if we address the gut can we really see improvement in that. I actually knew someone, I've known multiple people with this story, but I actually knew someone who had really Hashimoto's for sure. And, she'd been on medications a lot of her life and stuff, a lot of gut-brain connection stuff. And she was very, very deficient in vitamin D. And they had her on an absolutely incredible amount of vitamin D supplements. And she still was deficient in vitamin D. So what does this tell us? It tells us that, okay, either A, the sources we're getting it from are poor quality, and or B, the body, the vessel that is supposed to be processing these nutrients is malfunctioning. And so it doesn't matter how much we dump in the tank. If there's a hole in it, it's not going to matter. And that is what a lot of us are dealing with. We've seen sometimes better improvement in iron levels and anemia by adding in a quality probiotic than by adding iron itself. And less issues with getting backed up in people too, ironically so. Inflammation may so now they're looking at different ways to study this stuff, you guys, and identify food intolerances. Where I get a little iffy is that they do a lot of allergy tests and stuff. You can do the patch tests and things like that for full-blown allergies. But for intolerances, you guys, symptoms are everything. The way the body responds is everything. You should have a kind of a checklist to help people navigate if maybe they are intolerant to certain foods and substances, because they will know and you don't need to be the diagnoser. But recently, patch tests have been the only real way to identify food allergies within the medical community. But recently, science is developing imaging, actually, that assesses the inflammation within the intestines and touting this inflammation, and that may be far more accurate in confirming of food issues. and intolerances. And this is, they believe too that there's a correlation to things like, Crohn's and colitis issues, and even things like, different kind of intestinal barrier issues, is that chronic inflammation, because inflammation is present in a lot of those conditions. And so perhaps if we can understand food intolerances when they are presenting themselves earlier on, we can prevent some of this stuff from worsening and getting worse, things like diverticulitis. That was what I was looking for. So removal protocols. So if you aren't familiar with it, this is going to be great for you, or great info. If you are familiar with it, which most of you guys are because you're HWCA coaches, we're just going to assert a little bit more of why we do this and why it's so important. So for all the coaches that take people through the Buddha Belly protocol, why do we do that? We do that because we want data. We want data about everything, especially allergies and intolerances and food sensitivities and the state of the body. We really want that data. We also really want the data about our emotional health, the way our brain functions, the way we talk to ourselves, how we're medicating and our behaviors and what those kinds of things are connected to. We want deeper understanding of ourselves as whole vessels, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, beings. And so of course we do it for all these reasons, but for the specific purpose today of talking about allergens and intolerances, there's a lot of great data that we collect from going through a removal protocol. So that's why we do removal protocols. And sometimes removal protocol will take heat because people who don't have the knowledge in some of this stuff and don't quite understand it, or why, can view it as restriction and psychologically unhealthy. And here's the thing, is that people are going to do it at their own pace. It's not about a map of have to. It's about giving all the information and allowing the client to decipher what they're ready to do. Some people are desperate. They want everything you can give them. So we're not going to hold back giving them the information that we can. By doing a removal protocol, we pull a lot of the common irritant foods. So a lot of the, not necessarily the allergens, but the intolerance foods. So a lot of those, like beans and legumes, most grains, corn, soy, peanuts, which is a legume if you don't know, dairy, gluten, refined sugar, and processed foods. I mean, that is really, like, we yank all that out. Now coffee, people get a little, picky about their coffee, but we advise to pull it way back. You can, just at the beginning of the day, do organic, etc. But ideally we'd pull coffee, and definitely alcohol, especially wine, some of the good stuff that most people really love, is really hard on the gut. So by pulling this stuff out, we're able to, one, give the body a break. Okay. So removal protocol is removing a lot of these substances and foods that tend to be the most reactive to the gut and the state of the body. Why we do it is so that we can gain data and assess what our body does and doesn't like. Like I said, if it takes multiple days for you to react to a certain food, if you're reacting to a few different foods, there's a good chance that you or your client are completely lost as to what their body is saying to them and what it wants and what it's getting and what it's not getting and all of that. And especially if it takes a couple days for you to see that you were reacting poorly to corn, but you just ate dairy, which maybe you also react poorly to, or maybe you don't, but you don't know the difference, right? So by doing the removal protocol and then reintroducing in the way that we do for the things, then we're able to quiet the chaos and narrow it down. Listen to the body, understand it, and go through a process where we see what it feels like to have our body not reacting to a lot of these foods, because chances are most people are reacting to at least some of them, if not most. And so to clean that out and feel, it's recalibration. It gives you something to always work toward. Okay, it's not a perfection thing. It's something that allows us to hone in on it, to be able to address how it feels, to recalibrate to that degree if we get off track to a certain degree, if our health starts declining, if we start struggling with mental health, if we start, all of these things, inflammation's getting out there, having chronic migraines, sleep is an issue, skin's a problem, okay, then we can recalibrate back to this place where we knew our body function better. And in the state of doing that, we're going to get a lot of data. And when you go, so this is why we do the removal protocols, you guys, is really to gain the data, to help our clients gain the data. And why it's helping with intolerances is that When they gain that data, now they get to make a choice. And maybe the choice is not to eliminate forever. Like I gained enough data to eliminate gluten completely from here on out in my life. I don't eat it. And I have enough substitutions. I've been able to do it for 2.5 years now, and I've done just fine. So I had enough data to choose to do that. I felt the harm from what it was doing to my body by far superseded anything else. And I had enough data to make me want to make that choice. So I was able to be conscious about what I was doing and why. I also know my gut does not love conventional dairy in its like fullest. Like butter, not a big deal. I like to do organic ghee. It loves that, doesn't care. I love cheese every now and again. I don't like to do it often, but my body reacts so to that. It does not love things with milk, so things like ice cream or sour cream, but occasionally I want to eat that, but I just know what that means. Now, if I had not identified that my body responds this way to it, then I would just keep compiling all this together, and I could easily get stuck in a space for a long time of thinking that there's not understanding what it feels like to feel good, because I've always been riding the same roller coaster over and over and over, okay? And this is what we'll see a lot in people. They don't really know how they could feel, how their body wants them to feel, until they can pull some of this stuff out and really assess it and then move forward consciously. So that is why. And we go through that process very skillfully with our clients. And to wrap all this up, obviously we want to talk about coaching, not diagnosing, okay? You guys are not doctors. Don't try to be, like I say, always have a good functional medicine doctor in your back pocket. Always encourage your clients to discuss anything with their practitioners. You don't know what kind of medications they're on, if they're on, especially things like insulin for blood sugar regulation and stuff like that. Like you don't want to mess with that stuff. And so, but trust me, it does not inhibit the power that you have as a coach. If anything, it empowers what we can do as coaches, because we don't have to worry about the liabilities, legalities, all that. I can send you to, my favorite functional medicine practitioner, and they can do the blood work, and they can read the blood, and they can tell you where maybe you're deficient, and things like that. But what we get to do as coaches is we get to teach our clients, empower them, absolutely, but teach them how to read their own bodies, because even their best practitioners, functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, MDs, cannot possibly pull all the symptomology data out of them that they can of themselves. And if they don't know how to hear that, if they don't kind of know what that might look like, then they can get really lost in the process. So that's our job as coaches, is to educate and empower. And if we can teach them and help show them kind of what the body does, how it communicates and how it speaks, then we are giving them a great gift, because we are coaching them and we're giving them results. You don't want clients that are forever just dependent on you. That sounds great from a business perspective, right? But really, how effective are you if someone is with you all the time, forever and ever? I think a really good, effective coach, just like an effective counselor or therapist, would graduate people out, and they would be good enough at what they do to have enough new people waiting to come in. And it would be a phased approach. And maybe you have some kind of a maintenance or meetings or membership or group thing or something, so that you hang on to people, because we do all need that recalibration. I have my counselor, and I go through points where I see her regularly, and then I taper off for a while, and it's good for me to do. I'm on my own, and maybe I hit a place in life where I need to go back for a while. Maybe I'm on, so that's what she's there for. But that means she's doing a really good job. That means I'm doing a really good job. That means I'm putting forth the work too, because I'm not dependent on her dragging me somewhere every week or whatever, right? And so as a coach, you don't want that either. You want to be able to graduate your people. You want to watch your birdies fly on their own. Okay, that means you've done a good job. So like for me, training the coaches and just giving you the information and you completing the program and all that, like that is not where my work ends. That is not what solidifies that I've done my job, because you know your information well. Now you flying on your own, the coaches flying on their own and utilizing this information, watching them. We're just finished up our first interactive where I helped coach with the coaches and coach the coaches and coach with the coaches, coaching their first big group of clients through the Buddha Belly Gut Restoration Protocol and this whole thing, this whole removal process and everything in between. And it's so cool because you guys that are watching, and those of you who haven't done it, that don't know what these coaches did, they did so good. They were so good. They've had great success stories. They've built amazing rapport with their clients. They have gained knowledge. They have made personal strides in their own following of the program and their own health. And they have businesses. They are now leading people into coaching services. They have walked them through this protocol. They're doing it now. Now they're active coaches. They're actually working with people and doing this. Like, that is what we need to be able to do. And that's what we need to be able to do as coaches. Like I say to you guys over and over again, like what I do with the coaches transcends exactly into what you will do with your clients to some degree, even though you're working in a little different area of this. So just keep that in mind, that you want to help people transcend through a process. So a good coach doesn't need to diagnose. We don't need to step out of our scope of practice. Okay, but we will be very careful, because when we're talking about food removal protocols legally, we have to be very careful. So we can discuss dietary theories that align with the removal process. We can suggest or share other people's stories. We can suggest that different foods be avoided if XYZ is a symptom, or maybe suggest a protocol or a process in order to try and evaluate. But it's all in how we handle it in our verbiage. And the power is in our knowledge, and it's in our ability to empower the client. Like, that's where you're going to be effective. You're not going to be less effective because you're not pulling blood work and reading every little thing and trying to tell them now what to do. That is a really, really hairy line to step on. And I actually see a lot of coaches do it. And I have to say, for how freaked out people get about liability wise, that's probably one of the biggest liabilities that you can take on as a coach, is trying to step into the realm of naturopath. So network with those people, do that, and then know how to help read symptomology, at least around it. So you're never going to say like, hey, this means this, or this means this. But hey, if you're reacting to a certain food or a certain substance or a certain thing, it can present itself as X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Like, these are some common things that we see, and you can educate them in that. And then you have them journal stuff. They are going to come to their own conclusions. They are going to gain their own data. They are going to make their own choices. And if you do your job well at empowering that with them, when they do those processes, they will win, and they will love you for being a part of that process of helping them win. Okay, and that's going to make you a great coach. And a great coach like that is going to have great success with their clients. Not every one of them, you win some, you lose some, but you're going to have a majority great success with clients. And those clients are going to go on, they're going to take their success, and they're going to radiate that. So they're going to speak about you. Maybe they go on to start a completely new career or whatever because of what they've gone through with you. Maybe they just give you awesome referrals, and it keeps filling in your funnel of what you do as a coach. But don't go for the lifers. Make it a, when you do stuff like this with people, understand removal protocols, understand how the body's responding to different foods. Because if we don't understand what is happening, if we don't see it, if we're ignoring, if we're shutting off the smoke alarm, then we're allowing damage to persist. And then we start having worse and worse issues. Now we have chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation is present in almost every single disease you can think of, and there's a lot of big things that we're fearful of in regards to our health that we could do a lot about early on if we could just address the more simplistic communication of the body. So with that said, I hope you guys are empowered today in knowledge, and this month in knowledge and in purpose. And thank you for joining this class on allergies, or food allergens and removal protocols and intolerances. And if you have any questions, please ask the group, connect in there. And thank you for being a part of this. We will see you next month. Enjoy your Done For You content on this topic this month. I'm excited to watch you guys teach on it.